even more troubling, they were struggling with many different issues and went to mental health clinics or therapists outside of the community who really didn't have a sense of what was all about and what the particular struggles that members of our community were facing. And that mental health clinic that started a little over 20 years ago, is on schedule this year at our counseling center to have about 20,000 sessions. The more staggering part of that is about 40% of the clients in our mental health clinic are children, which is really an incredible thing. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because we have incredibly talented clinicians and staff that do an amazing job helping people each and every day. And even more than that, it happens because the people that are directing the counseling session and directing the clinic are people who have been invested in the community for years and years, who have dedicated their lives to helping those struggle with issues like anxiety and depression and all of the range of mental health issues that we're confronted. Particularly over the last couple of weeks, there's been a tremendous surge in the number of people coming to SBH, having a really difficult time dealing with all of the different things we've been bombarded with. We are blessed at SBH to have an incredibly talented, dedicated, committed individual who's made it his life work to help people struggling through life's challenges. The director of our clinic, Shlomo Lieberman.
So I am, completely honored and blessed to be here today with you, especially at an event that is themed for Shabbat. I think Shabbat is something that is very dear to me, probably very dear to most of us. And what I will be talking about is a mental health issue. It's a mental health subject, but it ties directly to Shabbat as well. And I think that's important. Just on what Charles was saying, the clinic, the counseling center, usually gets about 8 to 10 new patients, new calls a week on a regular basis. Since October 7th, we've been averaging about 25 to 30 calls a week. And they come in more and more and more. Can you guess the most common reason people are calling? The most common reason people are calling is either for their own anxiety, for their children's anxiety. People aren't sure what's going to happen, what's going to be, and they don't know how to cope and how to deal with it. A lot of the patients that we see, a lot of the patients that I see privately, are talking about the fact that they cannot seem to put their phones down. They sit and they watch the Instagrams, the Twitter, everything that's coming in. I know I'm old, it's X now, right? Not Twitter, but everything that's coming in, and they're stuck to it. Not only that, there's a feeling that if I put it down and I ignore what's going on, I'm abandoning my brothers in Israel. I'm showing that I don't care if I don't watch. So I have to watch, I have to see, and they're getting literally traumatized from what's going on. We know from 9/11 that watching news, watching information, watching these videos is a way that you can get secondary trauma. Most of my colleagues and myself are convinced that watching what's going on in Israel is not secondary trauma, but it's actually primary trauma. It's actually real because it is so tied to us and so strongly affiliated with us that it's not a secondary event, it's a primary event. And we don't know what to do. I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't know what to do either if it wasn't for my daughter. I have two daughters living in Israel. One of my daughters lives in the Old City. And October 8th, 9th, 2 days after everything happened, I was having a conversation with her, and I was telling her how scared I am, and I was actually trying to convince her to come live in, for her and her husband and my grandson to come live in my house and wait till this thing passes. And she explained to me, she said to me, Dad, there's actually 2 wars going on right now. It's not one war, it's 2 wars. The war that the soldiers are fighting, that the IDF is fighting, that's going on in Gaza right now. And the other war is a psychological war that's going on across the world. Hamas wants us to be afraid. Terrorists do things to terrorize. That's their goal. Their goal is making us afraid. They videoed all those horrible videos that I hope none of you watched, but probably all of us at least heard about. They videoed them not because they wanted to inform people, not because they were passing on information, but because they want us to be afraid and they want us to be terrorized. They don't want us feeling safe, no matter where we live. Whether we live in Israel, whether we live in New York, whether we live in Europe, they want us to be afraid. The anti-Semitic stuff that's going on across the world right now is sponsored by Iran and by Hamas as part of this psychological war. That's what this is. It is trying to get us to feel afraid and panicked and lock our doors and hide, because that's what terrorists do. So the first coping mechanism I want to give you today is a change of perception. The change of perception is when you're putting down your phone and you're not watching the news so much, and you're going on a media diet, right? You're not abandoning your brothers in Israel. You are being a soldier in the psychological war against Hamas. By taking care of you, by taking care of your family, by not getting terrorized, by not allowing yourself to get drowned in all of this material, you're not abandoning it. You're not quitting, you're not running away. You are actually fighting a war. And I think it's an important war. A very important war. That doesn't mean, by the way, that if you feel sad, if you feel anxious, if you feel nervous, it does not mean that you're losing the war. Those are true and natural feelings to have at a time like this. There isn't a moment during the day that the things in the back of in Israel aren't going through the back of my mind, and I'm wondering what's going on here and what's going on there. That's not losing the war. And we have to be true to these feelings, and we should be honest with these feelings, but we also have to measure what the feelings want us to do. If those feelings want us to lock the doors and hide, if those feelings want us not to get out of bed this morning, that's a problem. We don't have to allow those feelings to win. Right? We need to do the healthy things that we need to do. I will tell you the other thing I will ask you is that all of your children, when they come to you and they see that you're nervous and they see that you're worried and they see that you're scared, please do not lie to them and tell them everything's okay. It's not a good idea. The reason is, by the way, I know that a lot of you are mothers here, you are aware of what's called the mother's sixth sense, right? Mothers are born, when the baby is born, mothers have an instinct. They are aligned with their children and they have an instinct, and know what their children want or know what their children are feeling. The sixth sense has been studied and documented backwards and forwards. We all know that. What they don't tell you are two very important facts that they don't publicize. One is that sixth sense never goes away. It is always there. It gets covered up with a lot of other forms of communication. It gets covered up by a lot of dynamics, but that sixth sense between mother and child is always there. The other piece to it that they don't tell you is that it works both ways. Your kids walk in a room and they can sense, I don't care how old they are, they can sense your emotions. They get a sense of where you are at and what you're feeling within a moment of walking in. They may not understand the details, they may not understand why, but they know it the minute that they walk in the room. That's the way it works. So if you're going to tell them that nothing is wrong, when things are wrong, when you're feeling sad and you're feeling nervous and you're feeling afraid, all you're doing is making them lose their security in their own senses. You're making them doubt themselves. The best thing you have is you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to say to your kids, you know what? I am afraid. I'm thinking about all the things going on in the world, and I'm worried about what's going on in Israel, and I am worried about security, and I am worried about, and teaching them that it's okay to worry, it's okay to have those feelings, it's okay to be afraid, but at the same time we're going to move on, and we're going to go on, and we're going to be together. That's the goal. It's a every challenge that we have in our lives is an educational opportunity for our children to learn how we cope and to acquire better coping skills for themselves. So then the question becomes, how do we cope with all that's going on? Even if we go on the diet, right? Even if there's so much going on now. Even if we're not inundated, how do we cope? Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is routine. Don't stop your routine because of what's going on. Don't think that what you're doing is not important. I know I'm a little aging myself. There was a 1977 movie called Oh God. Remember that movie, Oh God? George Burns, right? George Burns played the role of God, right? And he came down and he spoke to John Denver, who played the role of this middle American guy, right? And when John Denver got to the point that he realized that he was talking to God, he started having a panic attack, right? And God says to him, it's a very interesting line because it takes place in 1977. God says that he hands him a shaver and he says, "Here, shave. I created the mundane and the routine to keep you grounded in life when you get overwhelmed." That was the line in the movie. I created the... Now, lo and behold, in the 90s and early 2000s, when trauma became such a big hit, right? Everybody starts talking about trauma and different things that traumatize us. One of the things that they found that actually does ground us in our lives is the mundane and routine things that we do. So your hairdresser appointment, your going out with your friends for lunch, your golf appointment, those are actually valuable mental health tools to ground you and keep you from getting overwhelmed and frustrated. You don't need to feel like you're being selfish when you take care of yourself and you do things for yourself. Self-care is a step in the psychological war against the trauma. That's what we need to do. So routine is one of those things that we need to keep flowing. A lot of people have shared with me that they're putting off smachot. They're putting them off because they feel it's quote-unquote inappropriate to celebrate to have parties, to have gatherings at a time when our brethren are suffering. And I'm going to tell you again, that's what Hamas wants. It is okay to celebrate people's birthdays, to celebrate occasions, to get together for a gathering like this that has evolved around chesed. It is not only okay, it is beneficial. Now, we can be respectful, and obviously they put a speech about what's going on in Israel in the event here, right? We can't do that. We can recognize and take a moment and recognize that other people are suffering, but we can't stop living. We have this model, by the way, in our lives already, right? You go to weddings. What do we do at the pinnacle, at the height of the wedding, right? The chatan steps on a glass. It's not only because it's the last time he ever gets to put his foot down. It's not the only reason, right? Well, the guy laughed at that a lot. Okay. So that's not just the reason, right? The reason is at the moment of the peak of our happiness, we take a moment out and we recognize that we're still living in loss. So that model we have for us, we need to do that now. Yes, there's a war going on. Yes, there's a life and people are in difficult situations right now. Okay? But ultimately, we must continue our lives. I will tell you a story my daughter shared with me yesterday. She has a very good friend who was expecting and had a baby, I think it was 3 days ago, like the beginning of this week, Sunday. Right? She had a baby, her first baby Sunday. Her husband was Gaza. Right? So they flew him on a helicopter. This is the Israel Army. Only Israel Army will do this. Okay? They flew him on a helicopter. They landed on the hospital's helipad. He came down, was there for the delivery, was there for a few hours, whatever it is, and they flew him back to Gaza so he could meet his baby. We don't stop living. Even in the midst of everything going on, we continue going on and we continue with our lives, and celebrations aren't only appropriate, they're important. They're extremely valuable and important. So, the one thing, I'm going to go someplace else, but the one thing I want to leave out is self-care. Right? I talked about doing the routines for self-care. I'd like to talk about the idea of what you do for self-care for yourself. And here's the reason. The reason is as parents or grandparents, you have a job. Your job is that your mood and your mental health is a drip down effect, and is going to drip down to the rest of your family. Right? Even if you're a sister, a granddaughter, it always mental health has that filtering effect. We are affected by the mental health of the people sitting next to us. So taking care of yourselves is not only taking care of yourselves, it's taking care of the people around you and giving you the strength to take care of the people around you and to be in a better place. So your massages and the things that you do for self-care, again, they're not selfish. They are acts of taking care of yourself to wage the psychological war that we will not curl up and will not hide. So there's another coping mechanism that I want to give you. It comes from the theory. The theory is not mine. The theory is that from a doctor by the name of Dr. Viktor Frankl. Dr. Viktor Frankl he was a psychiatrist who went through the Holocaust. He lived years in Auschwitz. Okay, and when he came out of Auschwitz, one of the things he said that kept him alive, or that kept him from going insane, is he almost treated it like a study. He watched the people around him and observed the people around him to see, who was coping and who wasn't coping. And he came out at the end of it with a wonderful theory. By the way, there are seats here. With a wonderful theory. The theory is, in his words, that happiness and success should never be pursued. Right? Happiness and success should never be pursued. Happiness and success are only side effects from committing your life to something larger than yourself. I say that again. Happiness and success are only side effects to committing your life to something larger than yourself. Now, Viktor Frankl may have created the theory, but he's not the one who created the science. The truth is that science is very built into the concept of Shabbat. Why do we do Shabbat? What is the purpose of Shabbat? Now, most of you will answer me, rest. Right? God rested, we're supposed to rest. It's not exactly a proper translation. The purpose of Shabbat is actually that we have one day a week that we reconnect to something bigger than ourselves. We come back and we reconnect to God, to spirituality, to our families, right? That's what we're doing on Shabbat. That's the purpose of it. And the reason is because God knew very well if we were going to be happy, successful people, the only way we were going to be happy and successful people is if we were connected to the things bigger than ourselves. So what are a few examples of that? First of all, my daughter, when she had that conversation originally, she told me that she and her friends are immune to the psychological war. I said, I don't understand. Why? She said, I'll tell you. She lives in the old city. 85% of the men living in the old city got called up and went. Right? So now there are a bunch of wives with a bunch of children with no husbands at home who need to take care of everything. So they have a rotation. Only in the Jewish mind can you figure this out. They have a rotation. On Monday, these two women take care of all these women's children while those women get to go to the supermarket and take care of things and go shopping and take care of them. On Tuesday, those two women take care of all these children so that all the other women go to the supermarket and do it. And they are so busy taking care of each other, right? Whether it be in the homes, in the schools, wherever the men and wherever the soldiers are missing, they're so busy that they don't have time for it. They just don't have time to get stuck in feeling powerless because there's so much to do. Got those words? Right? They can't get stuck in the powerless because there's so much to do. And when we have things to do, we feel powerful. Because when we're connected to things that are larger than ourselves, it gives us things to do. It gives us purpose. It is no surprise that Viktor Frankl's book that he wrote when he came out of Auschwitz is called Man's Search for Purpose. Because when we have purpose, we're all of a sudden happy. Now, I'm going to tell you, by the way, there's a wonderful, if you all want to give me your telephone numbers, I can give it to you. There's one of our psychiatric nurse practitioners in the clinic has started a WhatsApp of only positive news from Israel. It is a positive WhatsApp that only the positive news from Israel is being posted. You can all give me your phone number. I'll give it to her. She can add you to the phone number.
It's full.
Maybe they should get. Yes, I'll tell her to open up another one. Either that or I'll try to open it myself and just keep on transferring them. Because I think it's so important. I think it's invaluable. This is, by the way, what I get my niece from my daughter, I listen to 20 minutes of news a day, and I get my news from this website. That's all. That's my news. I will tell you, on the news, what I'm watching is I'm watching men in uniform getting ready to go for a war, and they're singing and they're dancing. It makes no sense. They look like they're going to a party. They're singing, they're dancing, they're hugging each other. There are smiles on their faces. They are going to fight a war. The reason is because they feel part of something bigger than themselves. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in 1 minute, but I want to understand that we have the opportunity here. We're not in Israel, and most of us can't get involved directly with what's going on there, but we have the opportunity here. Doing chesed in your own backyard, taking care of each other, programs like this one, are what we need to be doing at a time like this. When evil is poured into the war, we have to balance it out by adding chesed. So if you're not involved in any chesed activity, right? SBH is out there, there's the numbers to get involved, to volunteer. Please, by all means, get involved. Take your kids and get involved. Because getting involved in helping others is actually the cure for powerlessness. It's a recent study that was done, by the way. They take the people who are suffering from depression. That medication hasn't worked with their depression. And they pushed them and they got them involved in taking care of other people. And by taking care of other people, their own depression was lifted. Because when we are part of something bigger than ourselves, we are energized, we are given back, and we don't get stuck in that feeling of powerlessness. Now, I have a new mission. This whole thing in Israel has given me a new mission. And I'll tell you what it is. From watching the WhatsApps, so speaking to my daughters, I was in Israel in August. Every month I go to spend with my kids and my grandson. Well, really my grandson, my kids. Every year I go for the summer to Israel. And in the summer, in August, I was there. And there wasn't a weekend that went by that we didn't see a protest. The left were yelling at the right were yelling at their left, the Frum was yelling at the non-Frum, the non-Frum were yelling. All the buses rerouted because there's a protest here, there's a protest there. It was all over the place. Now, I'm watching the news and I want to admit to you that yes, I'm saddened by all the horrors that went on. But I'm getting a high. I'm getting excited. I'm getting excited because some of the things that I see are literally miraculous. Literally miraculous. So, do any of you know what percentage of the reserves in Israel that got called up for the war showed up? 120%. That means 20% more than were actually called showed up because they wanted to be part of it. Left their homes, left their families, left their children, put on their uniform, and went because they weren't going to be left out and they wanted to be part of it. Just imagine for a minute, God forbid America went to war. Suddenly we had a draft and we had to run reserves. What percentage do you think would show up? It would not be anywhere near 100%. Not only that, you would find most of them heading for the Canadian border. Right? That's our history, we know that. But 120%. Not only that, in the last 2 weeks, over 4,000 Haredi men enlisted, showed up. something that no politician, no leader has been able to do since the beginning of Israel. Not a single one. Amazing. It is not normal. It is not a normal society where so many people want to be involved in something. I'll go even further. Like I told you, in August I was there, I was watching the protests back and forth between the right and the left, and from and non-from. I get a WhatsApp a few weeks ago that over 2,000 pairs of tzitzit are being made. Why? Because non-religious soldiers went to their religious soldier friends, their comrades, admitted that they aren't wearing tzitzit, and said, I want to wear tzitzit. Now, just imagine for a second what that means that has to happen. What has to happen? In order for that to happen, a guy has to walk over to his friend, admit that he's doing something he doesn't like, and ask his friend for the help to change that. That can only happen in an environment that has zero judgment. It can only happen in an environment where there's zero chance of you making me feel bad or rejecting me. That's the only way it can happen. The idea that thousands of pairs of tzitzis are being made because soldiers, these are people who a month ago were yelling at each other, were screaming at each other at the top of their lungs. 2 days ago, a woman soldier from, I'm going to get the name of the city wrong, but you guys know it, I think it's Tel Dan, but I could be wrong, okay, was freed. The soldiers went into Gaza and they managed to find one of the captives and they freed her. She was actually a soldier herself who was taken into Gaza, who was taken captive. Okay? In her city, now remember, a woman soldier, by definition, in last month's Israel, would have been somebody from the left. Just telling you. In her city threw a massive party. The fact that she was saved. Right? They had a street party in her city. She hasn't even made it back to the city yet, right? She's still being hospitalized, taken care of. But her city threw an amazing party celebrating the fact that one life we saved. Do you know who threw the party? The Ger Hasidim. The Hasidim threw the party for this one soldier who was saved, who last month was from their political enemy. And they were dancing in the streets. Literally, I don't know if you've been in Israel lately, Israel loves their traffic circles, right? You ever see those traffic circles in Israel? Love their traffic circles. They were literally dancing around the traffic circles, hand in hand, celebrating the one life. Amazing. Brain-blowing. In 3 weeks, now again, I feel horrible about the carnage that we needed to suffer. I feel horrible about what we needed to do. But we have all been reminded, in a horrible way, but we have all been reminded that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves. Much bigger than ourselves. And that being part of something much bigger than ourselves are putting us in a place of not remorse, not sadness, not defeat, but in an excited, celebratory way that even though we're going to war, people have smiles on their faces, they're happy, they're helping one another. It is a different country in 3 weeks' time. I have a challenge for you. I don't know the answer, but I'm on a mission to find it. And I want to know how we hold on to this. How we, in peacetime, because it's going to happen, right? Israel is going to be peaceful again. It's going to go back to a place of being secure. there's no doubt in my mind, whether it takes a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year, we are going to get back there. God willing, with as little bloodshed as possible. But my question is, how do we not lose this? How do we hold on to this? So I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions that you can do. One is get involved in the positive that's out there today. You don't have to go to Israel and dance around a traffic circle. That's not what I'm asking you to do. Although if you'd like to, it's wonderful. What I'd like you to do is for you and your children to, and I'm sure it shouldn't be hard to get a hold of, I know that I think Barkai Yeshiva published a list of boys who are in the IDF right now who graduated from Barkai Yeshiva. And I think almost every other school probably has a similar list. Find those names. Write them into your siddur or write them on a piece of paper and take them to shul with you on Shabbat. And when you go and you sit and pray, think of these people. Don't only think about you and your family, think of them as well. Think of their return. Because one of the things, the best thing that we can do, the most important things for our health and our own well-being is we can be part of this. Part of the new Klal Yisrael, part of the new Israel, Sephardi, Ashkenaz, modern religion, doesn't make a difference. It no longer makes a difference. We are all one family. I'm not going to ask you to eat your filter fish, it's okay. But we're all one family. If we can begin to pray for each other, if we can begin to think of each other, we can hold on to this, and hopefully we don't need any more bloodshed to remind us where we are. I'm going to give you one more story. Out of all the stories in the war so far, it is one that has touched me the most. There was an elderly woman who on October 7th was at home with her husband. And 5 Hamas terrorists broke into her home and held her at gunpoint. And she looked at the terrorists, one of them, and she says to them, "You look pale. You need to eat." And she began to feed them. 5 hours later, when the IDF broke in and saved her, the soldiers were sitting around eating chocolate chip cookies. Now, she said 2 things when she was interviewed afterwards. I think they're incredibly, they're funny in a way, but they're incredibly profound. The first thing she said was, "I just knew that hungry men are more dangerous than fed men." It's a good lesson for all the wives here. Hungry men are more dangerous than fed men. The other thing she said, which I find amazing, and I wish, I don't want to be tested, but I wish I can emulate, is she said, "This is who I am. When I have people in my home, I feed them. This is what I do." In the biggest moments of terror, in the most horrific, scariest moments of her life, this woman was able to remain true to who she was. It means that we can show up to a battlefield with nothing, armed with nothing more than a chocolate chip cookie, and win if we are true to ourselves. The goal is to be the best version of ourselves, and throughout this, not allow the fear, the terror, the depression to change who we want to be. Ultimately, I really believe, and every time I learn more, our religion is set up for it. Our religion is set up where we are healthiest, we are more productive, we are more in a greater place when we are biyachad, when we are together, and we are remembering that we are all not individuals, but we are all part of something bigger than ourselves. I wish you a good day.